1800s, when Alexander Graham Bell first invented it, making a phone call was a process. For starters, you had to pick up an actual receiver. Think of those old-timey black receivers that kind of look like a cup and ball toy.
Historian Elizabeth Cobbs, author of the book The Hello Girls,
and I'm also a senior fellow at Hoover Institution at Stanford.
She walked us through the rest of the process.
So you pick up the receiver, and that would trigger an electrical charge
that you either generated with your crank or that came from the line, what were they called, central batteries.
That signal then traveled to a central hub, and there would be a click.
Click, sometimes in the ear of the operator on the other end.
Or there would be a light that would come up.
Or there would sometimes be a flap that would drop down. Today's notion of a dropped call comes from those flaps that would drop.
Basically, one way or another, the operator would be alerted.
Somebody wants to get in.
That person would then take the plug and put it into the jack on a big switchboard.
They would correspond with your thing lighting up or dropping down.
That would connect the operator to you. And she'd say,
and you'd say, I'm calling such and such. And then they would take the other end of their jack and they would put it into the correct plug.
And then the operator would start timing you.
Now, at some point, they would say, okay, I wonder if those people are still talking, because if they're done, boy, somebody else needs that line.
Your phone line is shared by like 16 other people in the community.
And so those folks, if they wanted to know, gosh, is the line free, they'd have to pick up their receiver and they go, oh my gosh, there she is, yakking again.
But you overhear everything about everyone's life.
Oh, yes.
So they would figure out if you were done with your call.
You would make a click. And the click would tell them, oh, they're still busy. But if it was dead, then they'd know the people were done. So that's the end of that call. But
now let's say you wanted to make a long distance call. The process was mostly the same.
Pick up the receiver, electric charge travels,
click.
Operators alerted to your call.
Somebody wants to get in.
Plugs you into the switchboard.
And that call would then get relayed across the country from operator to operator until finally you'd be connected.
So people liked the phone, but it had unintended consequences. The main job the telephone created was the telephone operator. And initially, all telephone operators were young guys.
But very shortly, I mean, just right away, within a year or so, the first women come on board.
The biggest reason for that shift was actually pretty simple.
Women were better at not getting irritated when they had someone barking their ear. So the women would be less likely to mouth off to a customer than these young boys who would get pretty mouthy.
So women were more polite, more patient. Plus, they were a lot faster.
It was a very fast-paced job. In fact, one operator writing about her experience said it looked like the women's hands were like hummingbirds darting over the wires.
So eventually, the profession became dominated by women.
Every single call went through, an operator, and 85% of those folks were female.
Now, this was a big deal because in the late early 1900s, there weren't many jobs for women, especially not high-paying jobs, office jobs. So all of a sudden, the telephone created an unforeseen problem. It brought thousands of women into the workplace at a time when the women's suffrage movement was just starting to take off. And that was unnerving for some people.
There was certainly a little bit of hesitation about what that would do with the roles of women. And the telephone company made a big deal that these are ladies. And, we have special places for them to have their lunch. The women were white. They were Americans whose families had been here a while, so they weren't immigrants as well, because they didn't want anybody with an accent. They wanted to make sure that you could understand these ladies.
Despite all these reassurances that these operators were quote-unquote proper ladies, at the end of the day, they were still called
working girls.
Kind of a derogatory term for women in the workplace at the time. And this generated a lot of suspicion and anxiety around the profession.
Yeah, there's always that little ripple of tension about women's roles changing. And in the case of the telephone, it brought massive changes.
Because it was clear that women were best for the job. So the demand overpowered the fears. Women kept those jobs.
And then the real tipping point came around 1917.
Do you remember kind of feel about a year ago? We told you
The U.S. joined World War I. It sent troops, artillery, And yes, telephone operators to the front.
What makes World War I so special and terrible? Why does it have this epic place in history, even if people don't know anything about it? But it's because it's the first time that we go, oh, holy whatever, what have we wrought? Because technology is what creates the Western Front, creates trench warfare, these people who are suddenly pinned down by technology, this machine guns that are spitting bullets at them faster than you can blink an eye. And then the telephone is an